"You're not just a maid," Mafia boss growled after uncovering her secret identity at midnight. The agency had called itself Priority Cleaners. It was a name Sienna Carter had found on a crumpled flyer shoved into the wire mesh of a bus stop bench. It smelled of desperation and rain-soaked paper, which was exactly what she needed. The interview had taken place in a cramped, fluorescent-lit office above a check-cashing store. Smelling of stale coffee and bleach, the man behind the desk had barely looked at the references she'd spent her last $300 forging. He just needed a body for a late-night crew. That was how. 2 nights later, she found herself walking through the wrought iron gates of Dante Moretti's estate. The place was less a home and more a fortress, a monolith of dark stone and bulletproof glass perched on the highest hill overlooking the fictional grime of East Harbor. The Black Vow ran this city, and this was its castle. Sienna kept her head down, her gaze fixed on the worn toes of her sneakers as the head housekeeper, a severe woman named Mrs. Petrov recited the rules. "You do not speak unless spoken to. You do not look Mr. Moretti in the eye. You do not touch anything that is not on your cleaning list. You are here from 10 p.m. until 5 a.m. You are invisible. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am," Sienna whispered, the picture of meek obedience. She was assigned the main floor in the West Wing. The West Wing, she'd learned from the terse briefing, contained Dante Moretti's private study from the first night. Dante knew something was wrong with her. He watched her on the security monitors from his penthouse office, a glass of scotch swirling in his hand. He vetted every new face personally. It was why he was still alive. This one, Sienna Carter, was different. She did not move like a maid. Maids were clumsy, or lazy, or rushed. This woman moved with an unsettling economy of motion. When she pushed a vacuum, it was imprecise, overlapping lines. When she dusted a vase, her hands were steady, her body balanced. She was never in the center of a room. She clung to the walls, her movements fluid, always aware of her exits and the cameras. He watched her wipe down the hallway molding. She was never directly under a lens. She used the cleaning cart to block the angle from the foyer camera. She turned her face toward the wall when the security guard, Marco, passed by. She was quiet, but her silence was not submissive. It was tactical. She made no small talk when Marco had tried, a simple, "Working late, huh?" She had only nodded, her eyes down, and moved faster, deeper into the next room. She was a ghost in a cheap uniform. While Dante watched her, Sienna was watching him. She cataloged everything. The house was run with military precision. 4 guards on rotation, 2 at the gate, 2 patrolling the grounds, keypads on every major door. She noted the way Dante's second-in-command, Luca, never left his side. She noted the hushed, violent arguments that happened in the cigar lounge after 2 in the morning. She was cleaning the main study on her 3rd night, the smell of leather and old books heavy in the air. This was the heart of the Black Vow. She was alone. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird in a cage. Her hands, however, were perfectly steady. She knelt by the heavy, black iron radiator, her rag in hand, with a movement so swift it was almost invisible. She pulled a small, flat black magnetic device from the waistband of her uniform and pressed it to the metal frame on the backside, deep in the shadows where it looked like just another piece of hardware. It was an audio recorder, high grade, with a 72-hour loop. It was not in plain sight, but it was hidden where no one would ever look. She exhaled slowly, resumed wiping the baseboard, and moved on. Dante saw her in person an hour later. He was walking the halls, a habit he refused to break. He turned a corner and she was there, polishing a silver mirror frame. She sensed him before she saw him. Her shoulders tightened for a fraction of a second. She stepped back, pressing herself against the wall. Her head bowed, her cleaning rag clutched in her hand. "You," he said. His voice was low, like gravel rolling in the tide. She flinched, but said nothing. "Look at me." It took her a visible effort. She raised her head, but her eyes only met his chin. "Look at me. Maid." Slowly, her gaze lifted. Her eyes were hazel, but they looked gray in the dim light, and he paused. He had expected fear. He saw that, yes, but it was old fear, banked like cold embers. Beneath it was something else, a sharp, searing intelligence, and deeper still, a chasm of grief so profound it momentarily stunned him. This was not the look of a woman worried about a cleaning job. This was the look of someone who had seen the end of the world. It made him angry. He hated puzzles he could not solve. He hated weakness, but this did not feel like weakness. It felt like control. "What's your name?" he asked, though he already knew. "Sienna, sir." Her voice was a rasp. "Get back to work." He walked past, but the image of her eyes was burned into his mind. Something was not right. The encounter that sealed his suspicion happened 2 nights later. It was past 3 in the morning. The halls were silent, pools of shadow broken by dim sconce lights. Sienna was carrying a heavy black trash bag toward the service exit. She was tired. Her discipline was slipping. Dante rounded the corner from the kitchens, moving with the silence that was his trademark. He was just there. Sienna gasped, a sharp intake of breath, and stumbled back. Her grip on the bag slipped. It fell to the marble floor, but it was not the only thing that fell. A sound, sharp and metallic, echoed in the hallway. A clack skitter. They both froze. Lying on the white marble, gleaming under the faint light, was a knife. It was not a kitchen knife. It was a slim, 7-inch tactical blade, matte black with a serrated edge, a boot knife. Sienna's eyes widened, her mask of submission shattering. She dove for it. She was fast, but Dante was faster. His boot came down on her wrist, pinning her hand to the floor just an inch from the handle. She cried out, a sharp sound of pain and rage. He did not press hard enough to break bone, just hard enough to trap her. He bent down, his face inches from hers. He could smell the faint, chemical scent of lemon polish on her skin, and beneath that, the smell of fear. He picked up the knife. "For cutting boxes?" he whispered, the question an accusation. Sienna's chest was heaving. She was caught. This was it. She should have run. "Yes," she breathed, the lie sounding pathetic even to her own ears. For tape, on the supply deliveries." Dante looked at the blade. It was made for one thing, and it was not tape. He tested the edge with his thumb, razor sharp, and he looked back at her. At the defiance now mixing with the terror in her eyes, he released her wrist. He straightened up, pocketing the knife. Sienna scrambled to her feet, rubbing her arm, her eyes darting to the hallway exit. "You're a terrible liar, Sienna," he said, his voice soft. He nodded at the trash bag. "Continue." He watched her grab the bag and hurry away, her footsteps almost silent, her posture rigid. He stayed in the hallway for a long time, the weight of the knife heavy in his pocket. He could not stop thinking about her. The contradiction was driving him mad. The submissive maid with the eyes of a wolf, the small, trembling woman who carried a combat knife. He found himself watching the security feeds not for security, but just to watch her. He watched her mop the floors, her movements rhythmic and hypnotic. He watched her scrub counters, the muscles in her back flexing under the thin uniform. He imagined the feel of her hair, which she kept tied in a severe, functional bun. He wondered what she smelled like without the bleach and lemon. This distraction was dangerous. It was an itch he could not scratch. He wanted to corner her, to shake her until the truth fell out, but he also wanted to see those eyes again, the ones that held the grief he recognized, because he saw it in the mirror every day. This growing tension was a taut wire in his chest, and he knew, instinctively, that she felt it too. She never looked at him, but she was always aware of where he was. The air crackled when they were in the same room. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. Rain lashed against the windows of the estate, a violent, noisy storm that matched the turmoil inside him. He was in the library, a vast 2-story room lined with books he never read. He was supposed to be reviewing ledgers, but he was thinking about the knife. He heard a sound. It was not a cry. It was a choked, desperate inhale. He stood from the high-backed leather chair where he'd been sitting in the shadows. He scanned the room. There, behind the massive, globe-shaped atlas, huddled on the floor, was Sienna. She was trying to be silent. Her shoulders were shaking violently, her hand clamped hard over her mouth to stifle the sobs. She was breaking apart. She was dusting the shelves when she saw it, a framed photograph on a side table. Not of Dante, but of a young boy with dark, laughing eyes. He looked just like Leo, her nephew. The reason she was here. The reason her sister, Maya, was dead. The grief, the fear, the crushing weight of the past 6 months. It all hit her at once. The facade of the quiet Maid crumbled. She sank to the floor, drowning in it. She was going to fail him. Maya was gone, and she was going to fail Leo. Dante watched her for a full minute. His first instinct was annoyance. Weakness in his house was a liability, but this was not weakness. This was agony. It was the raw, private pain he had seen in her eyes, now spilled onto his library floor. He walked over. The floorboards creaked. Sienna's head snapped up. Her face was pale, streaked with tears. She saw him, and pure, animal panic flooded her features. She scrambled to her feet, wiping her face frantically. "Mr. Moretti, I'm sorry, sir. I'll go." She tried to bolt past him. He did not grab her. He simply stepped into her path, blocking her. "Stay," he commanded. She froze, trembling, her eyes fixed on his chest. He turned, walked to the small wet bar built into the wall, and poured 2 fingers of scotch into a heavy crystal glass. He walked back and held it out to her. She stared at the glass as if it were a snake. "Sir, I can't—" "Drink it." His voice was not kind, but it was not cruel. It was absolute. She reached for it. Her hand was shaking so badly she could barely grip the glass. She saw the amber liquid shiver, threatening to spill. He reached out. His large, calloused hand covered hers, steadying the glass. It was not a gentle touch. It was a claiming, a gesture of control. But his skin was warm, and the sheer solidness of his grip stopped her shaking instantly. His thumb brushed the frantic pulse point on her wrist. She stopped breathing. Slowly, she lifted her head. Their eyes locked. He saw everything, the broken pieces of her, the terror of being caught, the exhaustion, and the stubborn, fiery core of a woman who was still fighting. She saw him. Not the monster of East Harbor, not the boss. She saw the man who had recognized her pain. She saw the isolation in his dark eyes, a loneliness that matched her own. Neither of them moved for 3, 4, 5 seconds. The storm raged outside, inside the library. The only sound was the unsteady catch of her breath. Nothing happened, but everything changed. He released her hand. He turned and walked out of the library, leaving her alone with the scotch and the silence. That night, Dante sat in his office, the knife she had dropped on the desk in front of him. He picked up his phone. "Luca," he said when his second answered. "I want a background check on the new maid. Sienna Carter." "The maid? Boss, she's just—" "Do it, a full workup. I want to know every place she's slept, everyone she's talked to, and find out what you can about Priority Cleaners, the agency that sent her." Luca returned 2 hours later. "It's thin. Boss, suspiciously thin. The agency is a shell, registered to a post office box in the Glades. The references she used, they don't exist. Social Security number is clean, but it feels new. It's like she didn't exist before 6 months ago." Dante stared at the knife. "Dig deeper. I want to know who she really is." Sienna was in her small, sterile room in the staff quarters, her back pressed against the locked door. The encounter in the library had terrified her. She had let him see her, that touch, his hand on her wrist. It had felt safe. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. She pulled her burner phone from the hollowed-out sole of her running shoe. She had not checked it in a week. She powered it on. One new message, a voicemail. She pressed the phone to her ear, her blood turning to ice. It was not a voice she recognized. It was distorted, electronic, and cold. A synthesized growl that scraped against her nerves. "We know you're in East Harbor, little rat. We see you. Stop digging. We're coming for the boy." She dropped the phone. The room spun. They had found her. They knew about Leo. She had to run. She had to run now. The voicemail was a shriek of ice in her veins. "We're coming for the boy." Sienna's knees gave out. She slid down the thin, plasterboard wall of her room, the burner phone clattering to the floor. They knew. After 6 months of running, of sleeping in bus stations, of forging a new identity from nothing, of scrubbing another man's floors just to stay invisible, they had found her. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps. Leo. They knew about Leo. Her sister's son, hidden away in a safe house 3 states over, living under a name she had prayed was untraceable. She had to leave. Not in the morning, not at the end of her shift. Now. She shoved the phone back into her shoe, grabbed her thin jacket, and wrenched open her door. The staff hallway was empty, the clock on the wall reading 4:05 a.m. Her shift ended at 5. She could slip out the service entrance. They paid her in cash weekly. She had enough for a bus ticket. She moved silently, a shadow passing through the kitchen, her heart hammering a desperate rhythm against her ribs. She reached the heavy steel service door, her hand closing on the push bar. Leaving early? Sienna froze. Dante Moretti was standing in the alcove by the pantry, a glass of water in his hand. He had been watching her. He was dressed in the same dark pants and white shirt from the night before, his sleeves rolled up, his hair disheveled. He did not look like he had slept. "Mr. Moretti," she stammered, her voice thin. She pulled her hand back from the door as if it were red hot. I have a family emergency. I need to leave." "An emergency," he repeated. It was not a question. He stepped out of the shadows, his eyes unreadable. "The kind that requires you to abandon your shift an hour early, without telling anyone?" "Yes, sir, it's my aunt. She's sick. I have to go." The lie was weak, pathetic. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a terror that had nothing to do with him, and everything to do with the phone call. Dante knew she was lying. He had known she was a liar since the night he'd taken her knife. This sudden, frantic need to run, just hours after his men had reported that her background was a ghost story, was too convenient. He set his glass down on the steel counter. "No." Her head snapped up. "What?" "I said no. You're not leaving." He walked toward her, closing the distance. She pressed herself back against the door, her escape route blocked by his body. "You have a contract through the end of the month. I'll forfeit my pay. I have to go." "You're running," he stated. His voice was quiet, a low vibration that seemed to shake the air between them. "I want to know why." "I'm not," she insisted, but her voice broke. "You are," he said, his hand coming up to rest on the door, just beside her head. He was close enough now that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "And I do not employ people who run. It makes me curious. It makes me think they have something to hide." She was trapped. He was toying with her. "Please, sir, you will finish your contract," he said, his voice flat. "The full month. Then you can go." "I can't." "You will." He leaned in, his gaze dropping to her mouth for a fraction of a second. "Or I will find out why you are in such a hurry to leave, and I promise you, you will not like how I find out." He was giving her a choice. Stay in the cage where he could see her, or be hunted in the wild. She stared at his chest, her mind racing. If she ran, he would send his men. They would find her. They would find Leo. If she stayed, she was trapped with the monster, but at least she was a monster she could see. I need the money," she whispered, grasping at a new lie. "This job doesn't pay enough for this." Dante almost smiled. It was a cold, sharp expression. "Then you'll be happy to know your pay is doubled. Effective tonight, $10,000 a month in cash. Now, finish your shift. You missed a spot in the foyer." He pushed off the door and walked away, leaving her trembling, cornered, and worth a great deal more than she had been an hour ago. Dante's decision to keep her was a violation of his own code. Every instinct screamed that she was a threat, a spy, a plant, but then he would remember the library. He would remember the raw, unshielded grief he had seen in her eyes. Spies did not break like that. Spies did not cry with such devastating, hopeless sincerity. The contradiction was a sickness in his gut. He wanted to protect the woman who had cried on his floor, and he wanted to destroy the woman who carried a combat knife and lied to his face. This internal war manifested as obsession. He stopped watching her on the monitors and started watching her in person. He would stand in the doorway of the grand hall, leaning against the frame, and just observe her. She was mopping the marble floors, back and forth, rhythmic, precise. The swish of the mop, the squeak of her shoes on the wet stone. She knew he was there. He could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her spine stiffened, but she never looked up. She just kept working, her movements becoming faster, more clipped, as if she could scrub him away. He followed her on her break. The other staff took their 15 minutes in the brightly lit, noisy kitchen. She did not. She went out a side door into the gardens, even as the late-season chill bit at the air. He watched from his study window as she walked to an old, cracked fountain at the edge of the property. Choked with dead leaves, she sat on the cold stone rim and did nothing. She just stared at the stagnant water. She looked small, lost, and utterly alone. He found himself fighting a bizarre, unwelcome impulse to go out and put his coat over her shoulders. He crushed the feeling with brutal efficiency. He needed to know who she was. He did not know which was more dangerous, the possibility that she was his enemy, or the fact that he was starting to hope she was not. The night after, he forced her to stay. He was in his study when a meeting went bad. It was a shipment dispute, a betrayal from a supposedly loyal captain. Dante did not yell. He did not make threats. He simply ended the meeting, walked to the adjoining private bar, and punched the solid oak paneling. Pain, sharp and white, shot up his arm. He looked at his hand. His knuckles were split, blood welling up, a shard of dark agave glass from a shattered bottle embedded near his thumb. He was wrapping a bar towel around the wound when she appeared. He hadn't even heard her enter. She was supposed to be cleaning the upper floor. "Sir," she said, her voice quiet. He turned, the towel already soaking through. "What?" he snapped. She did not flinch at his tone. Her gaze dropped to his hand, then to the medical kit mounted on the wall near the bar. "You need to clean that," she said. It was not a suggestion. It was a statement of fact. Her voice was flat, professional. "I can handle it." "You'll get an infection," she said, still not looking at his face. "Or ruin the stitches you clearly already have." He paused. She was right. He had split the old scar on his ring finger. He hated her for noticing. He hated her for being right. He unwrapped the towel and held his hand out, a silent, furious command. Sienna retrieved the kit. She worked with the same unsettling precision she used for everything. Her hands did not shake. She poured antiseptic over the wound, and he hissed as it burned. She did not react. She was all business. Her touch light but firm as she probed the cut. "Hold still," she murmured, and before he could object, she had taken a pair of tweezers and, with one swift, practiced motion, pulled the shard of glass from his skin. He stared at her. Who was this woman? She began to bandage the wound, her small, pale fingers working deftly, wrapping the gauze tightly around his much larger hand. The room was silent except for the crinkle of the wrapper. He could smell her, that faint scent of lemon polish, but beneath it, something warmer, like soap and clean cotton. She finished, her fingers lingering for a second to secure the tape. His hand was steady now. He turned his palm up, his fingers lightly brushing hers. Her hand was on top of his. He lifted his other hand, the uninjured one. Slowly, he raised it to her face. She watched him, her eyes wide, her breath caught in her throat. His thumb brushed her lower lip. She jerked back as if he had struck her. A sharp, violent flinch, but her eyes... It was not fear he saw. It was shock. It was a deep, painful confusion, as if his touch was something she had wanted but knew she could not have. It was the terror of trusting him. He let his hand fall, but he did not release her gaze. "You hide so much behind those eyes," he whispered. She stared at him, her lip trembling where he had touched it. Then she turned, packed the medical kit with sharp, angry movements, and left the room without another word. The next afternoon, Luca came to his office. His face was grim. "Boss, we found something." Dante looked up from the ledgers he was pretending to read. "What?" "Priority Cleaners, the shell corp that ran it. We tracked the money." Luca slid a folder onto the desk. It's thin, but the account it was funded from, it has ties to the Hollow Sons. Dante's blood went cold. The Hollow Sons, his father's killers. The rival faction that had been chipping away at his territory for a year, responsible for at least 3 high-level assassinations. A spy, Dante said. The word was flat. Dead. She's a plant. Dante, Luca urged, his voice low. She's been in your study, in your house. God knows what she's seen. What she's planted, the knife, the fake background, it all adds up. She's Hollow Son. Dante looked at his bandaged hand. He thought of her in the library. He thought of her flinch when he'd touched her lip. Get rid of her, Luca said. Now. A bullet is clean. It's simple. Dante closed the folder. No, not yet. Boss, she's a snake in your bed. Then I want to know why, Dante snarled. I want to know what they sent her for. Find out who she's talking to. His mind was a storm. If she was a spy, she was the best he had ever seen. The grief was real. The fear was real. But the Hollow Sons were real, too. That night, Sienna felt the walls closing in. She was trapped. Dante was watching her with a new, cold intensity. He knew she was lying, and the threat to Leo was a constant, screaming siren in her mind. She was in the cavernous, steamy laundry room in the basement, pulling Dante's sheets from an industrial dryer. It was the most isolated place in the house. She pulled her wallet from her back pocket, a worn, cheap thing she'd bought at a gas station. Tucked behind her fake driver's license was a small, folded photograph. She unfolded it. It was her why. Leo, 3 years old, sitting on her sister Maya's shoulders. They were at a street fair, grinning, their faces sticky with cotton candy. Maya, her brilliant, brave older sister, who had been a federal agent. Maya, who had been murdered by the same people now hunting her son. Sienna's vision blurred. She had failed her. She'd gotten her sister killed, and now she was going to get Leo killed. She was trapped in this gilded cage, washing the clothes of a monster. While the real monsters circled her nephew, she sank to the tiled floor, the warm sheets spilling around her, and she wept. She clutched the photo to her chest, her sobs choked and silent, lost in the mechanical hum of the dryers. Dante was on his way to the wine cellar when he heard it, a sound that did not belong. He followed it to the laundry room. He pushed the door open, his hand on the butt of the gun he always wore at his waistband. He was expecting an intruder. He found her. She was on the floor, crumpled, her body shaking. It was the library all over again, but this was worse. This was not quiet grief. This was the sound of a soul tearing apart. His fury at Luca's report, his suspicion, his cold resolve, it all shattered. He walked over to her. She did not hear him until he was standing over her. She looked up, her face streaked with tears, eyes wide with terror. She scrambled to hide the photograph. "Sir, I'm sorry, I was just—" He did not want to hear another lie. He bent down and pulled her to her feet. He was not gentle, but he was not rough. He just hauled her up, his hands gripping her upper arms. "Stop crying," he commanded, his voice harsh. It only made her cry harder, a desperate, gasping sound. She tried to turn her face away, ashamed. "You don't understand," she whispered, her voice breaking. She was trembling so hard he could feel it through his hands. "Then make me—" She shook her head, tears flying. She pushed against his chest, her hands flat. "Let me go. Please, just let me go." "No." She pushed again, harder, and he did not budge. She was resisting, but it was weak, and then, as if a string had been cut, she broke. The fight vanished. She sagged against him, her forehead falling to his chest, her hands fisting in the front of his black shirt. She wept into him, a muffled, desperate wail. Dante froze. He did not comfort people. He did not hold crying women, but he did not push her away. His hands, still on her arms, slid up. One hand moved to her back, pressing her closer, as if to absorb the tremors. The other came up to the back of her head, his fingers sinking into the tight bun of her hair, dislodging it. Her hair, free of its prison, tumbled down over his hand. It was softer than he had imagined. He held her. He just stood there, in the heat and the steam, and held this broken, mysterious woman. She finally quieted, her breathing ragged. She pulled her head back, just enough to look up at him. Her eyes were red, her lips parted, her face awash in vulnerability. The space between them was electric. He saw her gaze drop to his mouth. He saw the pulse hammering in her throat. He lowered his head. She met him halfway. It was not a kiss of passion. It was a kiss of desperation. It was slow, soft, and trembling with hesitation. His lips brushed hers, a question. She answered with a small, broken sigh, and her lips parted under his. It was salt and soap and the taste of her tears. It was breathless. Her hands, which had been fisted in his shirt, uncurled, gripping him tighter. His hand at her back pulled her flush against him, his other hand still tangled in her hair, tilting her head. It was the first moment of peace, the first moment of safety either of them had felt in years, and it was that feeling of safety that terrified her. Sienna tore her mouth from his. She shoved him hard, stumbling back until she hit one of the dryers. "No," she breathed, her face pale with shame and a new, sharper fear. I can't. She had just kissed him. Dante Moretti, a killer, a man who held her prisoner, and she had wanted it before he could say a word, before he could process what had just happened. She fled. She ran from the laundry room, her footsteps pounding up the stairs. Dante stood alone. The scent of her on his skin, the taste of her on his lips. He was shaking. He was no longer confused. He was furious. At her. For running. At himself. For letting her. He knew, with absolute certainty, that she was not a hollow son. No spy kissed like that. No spy broke like that. She was something else. He pulled out his phone. He did not call Luca. "Marco," he said when his head of surveillance answered. "The maid, Sienna. She finishes her shift at 5 a.m. I want a tale on her, a ghost tale. I want to know where she goes, who she sees, and who the hell that boy in the photograph is. She cannot spot you. Do you understand me? Do not lose her." He hung up. He needed to know everything. Marco returned at 6 in the morning, his face pale and slick with rain. Dante was waiting for him in the foyer, a cup of coffee untouched in his hand. "Boss," Marco said, his voice raw. He hated to fail. "Where is she?" Dante's voice was quiet, which was always worse than when he yelled. "She's gone." Dante's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean, gone?" "I mean she's a ghost. I've tailed politicians, informants, my ex-wife. I've never seen anything like it." Marco ran a hand through his wet hair. She left the estate at 5:03 a.m., walked 3 blocks to the bus stop. Normal. She took the M14 bus heading downtown. I was 3 cars back. She got off at Mercer Street. I parked, followed on foot. She went into a 24-hour diner. I waited. She never came out. "The back door," Dante said, disgusted. "There is no back door. Boss, I checked. It's a solid wall. She went in. She vanished. I sat there for an hour. I finally went inside. The waitress said she saw her, said she went to the restroom and never came back." Dante's gaze was fixed on the rain lashing the driveway. "The window, it's a tiny bathroom window, leads to a blind alley," Marco said, shaking his head. "She used the reflections in the storefronts to spot me. I'm sure of it. She boarded the bus to confirm the tale, then used the diner as a misdirection. By the time I realized she was gone, she could have been anywhere. She's not just trained. Dante, she's professional." Dante said nothing. He had wanted her to be a victim. He had wanted her to be a grieving woman in over her head, but professionals were not victims. They were threats, the hollow sons. He could handle the feds. He could handle. But this woman who had kissed him in the laundry room and cried in his arms was a trained operative. She was hiding more than a stolen past. She was hiding a war. The break-in happened 2 nights later. A storm was clawing at East Harbor, a violent, shrieking wind that rattled the bulletproof glass of the estate. Dante was in his study, watching the rain, the tension in the house a palpable thing. Sienna had been avoiding him since the failed tale. She moved through the house like a phantom, her face pale and shut down. The air between them was static, charged with unspoken accusations and the memory of that desperate kiss. It happened just after midnight, a sound that did not belong. Not the howl of the wind, not the crack of thunder. It was the sharp, splintering crack of a door frame, followed by a muffled shout. Dante was moving before the sound finished, the gun from his desk drawer already in his hand. He met Luca in the hall, who was similarly armed. "Kitchen entrance!" Luca snapped. They moved as one, silent and fast. They found two of Dante's guards at the end of the service hall, standing over two bodies. The intruders were dressed in black tactical gear, their faces obscured by masks. "Two of them," Marco said, his own gun still smoking. "They used a hydraulic spreader on the service door. Fast, quiet. They never fired a shot." Dante's eyes swept the hall. His gaze fell on the open kitchen doorway. "Where is she?" He pushed past Marco. The kitchen was a wreck. Sacks of flour were overturned, pots scattered. He found her near the pantry. She was unconscious, lying on the white tile floor. Near her hand was a heavy, dented silver tray. A few feet away, a third intruder was groaning, his nose clearly broken, a guard's boot on his neck. She had fought back. Dante knelt beside her, his gun forgotten. He checked her neck for a pulse, strong, steady. There was a dark, angry bruise forming on her temple, where she must have hit the edge of a counter when she fell. He looked at the unconscious man, then at the two dead ones. They were not thieves. Thieves were loud and stupid. These men were silent, equipped, and professional. They had come for one thing. He scooped her into his arms. She was light, a dead weight. "Find out who they are," he ordered Luca, his voice a low growl, "and who sent them." He carried her up the main staircase, bypassing the staff wing, and took her to a guest suite near his own. He laid her on the bed, the silk comforter bunched around her. He brushed the hair back from her face, his thumb tracing the bluish mark on her temple. He was overwhelmed by a cold, searing rage. They had come into his home. They had tried to take her. He sat in the chair by the bed and waited. The storm raged, but the silence in the room was heavier. Sienna woke with a gasp, her heart hammering. The room was unfamiliar, dark, opulent. She tried to sit up, but a wave of nausea and pain sent her spinning back to the pillows. "You're safe!" She flinched, her eyes snapping to the corner of the room. Dante was sitting in the shadows, watching her. "What happened?" she whispered, her hand going to her head. "You tell me," he said, standing and walking toward the bed. "3 men in tactical gear broke into my kitchen. They were not here for the silver." "Sienna," she stared at him, her mask of the timid maid completely gone. "I don't know what you're talking about." His patience, already worn thin by days of suspicion, snapped. "Stop lying," he roared, his voice echoing in the large room. "They came for you, just like you evaded my tail like an agent, just like you carry a combat knife to dust shelves." "Who are you?" The accusation, his anger, the throbbing in her head, it all coalesced. Her fear, bottled up for months, finally erupted into a wild, desperate rage. "Who am I?" she shouted, shoving herself upright, ignoring the spinning room. "I'm the woman you've trapped in this house, the one you toy with. You think I'm nothing but a maid?" She was trembling, her voice cracking. "You think I'm just some pathetic girl you can corner in the laundry room and bully?" The admission, the reference to their kiss, hung in the air. The fury in his face faltered, replaced by something complex, something almost hurt. He stepped closer. "I think you're a liar," he said, his voice dropping, but the anger was still there, now defensive. "And you're a killer," she shot back, the words a shield. "I see how they look at you. I hear the whispers. You're Dante Moretti. You own this city. You own me." Her words struck him, hard. He stopped, just a foot from the bed. He looked at his hands, then back at her. "Yes," he said. The simple, cold admission deflated her anger instantly, leaving her exposed and shaking. "Tell me the truth, Sienna," he said, and his voice was no longer angry. It was rough, a raw plea. "Let me help you." She looked away, her gaze falling to her hands, which were twisting in the sheets. Tears welled. "I can't," she whispered. "You can't. They'll kill you, too." He reached out, his hands closing on her shoulders. He wanted to shake her, to force the truth out, to break down the walls, but she was trembling under his grip, so fragile, so terrified. He saw the dark bruise on her temple, and the rage he felt was not for her lies, but for the people hunting her. His grip softened, his thumbs began to rub her shoulders, a small, unconscious gesture of comfort. "All right," he whispered, his voice heavy with 1,000 unspoken questions. "All right, then don't lie to me either." She looked up at him, her tear-filled eyes wide, shocked by the sudden shift. "No more lies," he said. "If I ask you something and you can't tell me, you say nothing, but you will not lie to me again. Do you understand?" She stared at him, at this monster who had just offered her a strange, dangerous kind of truce. She nodded. A single, jerky motion. The storm outside chose that moment to unleash its full fury. A crack of thunder, so loud it shook the house, was followed by an instant of profound silence. The lights flickered. They went out. The room was plunged into absolute darkness. Sienna cried out, a small, terrified sound. Then, the emergency backup system kicked in. Dim, battery-powered sconces flickered to life, casting the room in a pale, ghostly glow. It was a world of shadows and candlelight. "Dante," she whispered, her voice shaking. It was the first time she had used his name. He did not release her. He was too close, the air too thick. The storm, the darkness, the adrenaline, it had stripped them both bare. "They found me," she whispered, her eyes locked on his. She was not talking to him, she was just confessing. "They'll find him. They'll never stop." "Who?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. She shook her head, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. She looked at his chest, then at his mouth. She saw the man who had just offered her a truce, the man who had sat by her bed, the man who was her captor, and the only person who had made her feel safe in 6 months. She was done running. She was done being alone. She rose to her knees on the bed, bringing her face level with his. Her hands came up, not to push him away, but to grip the front of his shirt. Then she kissed him. It was not the hesitant, broken kiss from the laundry room. This was a kiss of total desperation. It was hungry, angry, and hopeless. It was the kiss of a woman who was clinging to the only solid thing in a world that was collapsing around her. Her mouth was rough, demanding, her fingers twisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. He met her with equal force. All his frustrated obsession, his suspicion, his raw, protective rage, it all ignited. He backed her onto the bed, his body covering hers, his mouth devouring hers. His hand tangled in her hair, and his other hand gripped her waist, a bruising, possessive hold. She gasped against his mouth, a sound of pure surrender. He broke the kiss, his forehead resting against hers. They were both breathing hard, their chests heaving. The rain hammered against the windows, a frantic drumbeat. "Sienna?" he breathed, a warning, a question. "Don't talk," she whispered, her eyes squeezed shut. "Please, just for tonight, don't let me be alone." It was the rawest plea he had ever heard. He looked down at her, at the tear tracks on her face, the desperation in the set of her mouth. This was not a spy. This was not an agent. This was a woman at the end of her rope. He lifted her. She wrapped her legs around his waist, her arms locking around his neck, burying her face in his shoulder as if she could hide there. She clung to him with a strength that belied her size. He carried her from the guest room, down the shadowed hall, and into his own. His room was dark, the only light from the candles he always kept on the dresser. He laid her on the cool sheets, her body a pale silhouette in the gloom. He didn't turn on the lights. He didn't want the real world. He wanted this. He moved to pull the stained, wrinkled maid's uniform off her, but she stopped him, her hand on his chest. Instead, she just pulled him down. He moved over her. Their lovemaking was not gentle, but it was deeply emotional. It was not about finesse. It was about anchors. It was two people, shattered and haunted, clinging to each other in the dark, trying to prove they were still alive. His hands gripped her hips. Hers clawed at his back. It was a silent, desperate language of touch and pressure, a temporary peace found in the eye of the hurricane. Dante woke first. The storm had broken, leaving a gray, watery dawn. He turned his head. Sienna was asleep, her face buried in the pillow, her dark hair fanned out. She looked peaceful, young. The sight of her in his bed, safe, stirred something in his chest he refused to name. He slid out of bed, careful not to wake her. He pulled on a pair of gray sweatpants and left the room. Luca was waiting for him in the kitchen, nursing a coffee. He never slept. He held up a thick 9x12 manila envelope. This was delivered at 6 a.m., Luca said, his voice flat. Left at the gate. Courier. Dante took it. It was heavy. He ripped it open. Photographs spilled onto the marble island. His blood ran cold. It was Sienna. Sienna laughing over coffee with a man Dante recognized, Agent Grayson, a known FBI task force leader. Sienna standing outside the East Harbor Federal Building. Sienna at a shooting range, flanked by two men in suits, holding a pistol with a perfect two-handed grip. Betrayal. The word was acid in his throat. So the break-in was a fake, Luca said, his voice hard. A setup. To get her closer to you, she's a Fed. Dante. Dante stared at the photos. He saw Sienna's face, laughing. He saw her face last night, shattered and desperate. Both were real. No, Dante said, his voice low. The break-in was real. The men we killed were Hollow Sons. He looked at Luca. This isn't a betrayal. It's a setup. The Sons want her dead. They failed to grab her. So now they're trying to make me do it for them. They're trying to poison me. Boss, the courier is in the warehouse, Luca said. He's talking. He got the package from a Hollow Sons lieutenant, a guy named Styx. Bring him to the study. Sienna woke up alone. The bed was empty. The other side was cold. Panic, sharp and immediate, seized her. It was a mistake. She was a fool. She scrambled out of bed, grabbing Dante's black shirt from the floor and pulling it on. It fell to her knees. She felt small, exposed. She had to find him. She crept down the massive staircase, her bare feet silent on the cold marble. She heard voices from the study, loud, angry. She slipped into the shadows of the hallway, just outside the partially open door. Think I'm stupid? It was Dante, his voice a low, lethal snarl. Please, Mr. Moretti? Another voice whimpered. I just delivered the packages. It was Styx. He just paid me to drop it. Styx is dead. I had him picked up an hour ago. He told me everything, and he told me his bosses wanted the maid gone. And when my men stopped the retrieval team, they sent you with pictures to make me think she was a Fed, to make me kill her. Sienna's hand flew to her mouth. Please, the man sobbed. I have a family. I didn't know. You came to my house, Dante said. His voice was terrifyingly calm. You tried to make me murder the woman in my bed. You don't get to have a family. A single gunshot. The sound was a cannon blast in the enclosed space. It echoed through the house, through her bones, a heavy, final thud. Sienna did not scream. She could not breathe. He had just killed a man. He had killed him because of her, because of the photos, because of the Hollow Sons. She backed away from the door, her entire body shaking violently. She had done this. She had brought this death. She had put him, his men, everyone in this house in the line of fire. Her past was a plague, and she was the carrier. She turned and fled, back up the stairs to his room. She was a contamination. She had to leave. She found her maid uniform in a heap and dressed with frantic, clumsy fingers. She had to tell him. He had to know why. She found a pen and a sheet of his heavy, cream stationery on the desk. Her hand was shaking so badly she could barely write. I'm sorry. You can't protect me. No one can. It was not enough. He deserved more. He deserved the truth he had asked for. She dug into the pocket of her uniform pants, pulling out her cheap wallet. From a hidden slit in the leather lining, she pulled out 2 small, jagged fragments of metal. They were all she had left of her past. She placed the note and the 2 gleaming, broken pieces of her FBI badge on the center of his pillow. Sienna Carter ran from the room, down the service stairs, past the study where she knew a body lay cooling, and out the kitchen door. She disappeared into the damp, gray morning, a ghost once more. Dante walked out of the study, the acrid smell of gunpowder clinging to his clothes. The body was gone. Luca was already handling the cleanup, the disposal, the erasure. It was just another Tuesday. But as he climbed the stairs, the cold, mechanical efficiency he usually felt was absent. He was hollowed out. The gunshot still echoed in his ears, but it was her name, her whispered Dante, that haunted him. He reached his bedroom. The door was ajar. He pushed it open. Sienna? The room was empty. The gray dawn light illuminated the unmade bed, a stark white landscape of tangled sheets, and on his pillow, a single sheet of his own stationery and two small, gleaming pieces of metal. He did not move for a full minute. He simply stared. He knew, before he even touched them, what this was. It was goodbye. He walked to the bed. He picked up the note first. "I'm sorry. You can't protect me. No one can." His hand clenched, crumpling the heavy paper. "You can't protect me." The words were a direct challenge, a dismissal, a rejection. He looked at the metal fragments. They were jagged, as if snapped in half by force. Part of an eagle's wing. The letters... AU of Inve. Federal Bureau of Investigation. The photos Luca had shown him. The setup by the Hollow Sons. And this... She was FBI, or she had been. He sank onto the edge of the bed, the note in one hand, the broken badge in the other. Betrayal. The word was there, but it felt wrong. It felt hollow. Last night had not been a lie. The woman he had held, the desperation in her kiss, the way she had clung to him in the storm, that was the truest thing he had felt in a decade. She had not been a spy. She'd been a casualty, and now he understood. He understood the precision, the knife, the way she evaded cameras, the ghost-like disappearance from the diner. He understood the grief that he had seen in her eyes, a grief so profound it had called to his own. It was not just a job. It was a wound. It had begun 2 years ago. Sienna's sister, Maya Carter, had been a rising star in the FBI's East Harbor Task Force. She was the lead agent on an operation to dismantle the Hollow Sons, a brutal, up-and-coming organization specializing in high-level assassinations and arms dealing. Sienna, a brilliant analyst and informant, had been her sister's secret weapon, working deep inside the federal database, connecting dots no one else could see. The operation had been a disaster. Maya's entire team had been ambushed during a supposed sting operation. They were executed, every single one. The official report called it a botched raid. Sienna knew better. It was a setup. Someone inside the task force had leaked the location. The Hollow Sons had not just been tipped off, they had been assisted. When Sienna started digging, she found that her sister's files were gone, her own access was revoked, and a quiet internal investigation had been opened against her. She had run, taking the one thing Maya had left behind, her son, Leo. Sienna had been Maya's emergency contact, the boy's legal guardian. She had grabbed him from daycare, liquidated her life, and vanished, becoming a ghost. She had been running for 6 months, running from the Hollow Sons, who knew she was the last loose end, and running from the corrupt agents within her own government who needed to silence her before she could expose the truth, that the task force had not just been compromised, it had been a partner. Dante did not know these details. He only knew what the evidence told him. She was a woman hunted by everyone. She had run from him because she had heard him kill a man, and she believed she was bringing that death to his door. She was not trying to escape him. She was trying to protect him. A cold, possessive fury, unlike anything he had ever known, settled in his chest. It was a rage so pure it burned. She thought she could leave. She thought she could run from him. She was wrong. He dressed in silence. Black jeans, black Henley, his boots. He strapped a holster to his side. "She's gone," he said, walking into the kitchen where Luca was reviewing security footage. Luca looked up, his expression guarded. "The badge? On my pillow. She left it." "So she was a Fed," Luca stated, his relief palpable. "She was a plant. Good riddance. I'll double the perimeter." "She's not a plant," Dante said, his voice flat. He grabbed a set of keys from the counter. The break-in was real. The Hollow Sons want her dead. The feds who sent those photos want her dead. She's running from both. Luca frowned, processing this. A civilian? Caught in the middle? Not a civilian, Dante said, pocketing the broken badge fragments. She was one of them, and now she's a target. They sent those photos to make me kill her for them. She ran because she heard me execute the courier. She thinks she's poison. Where are you going? To find her. Get the men. Tear this city apart until you find her. And the cleaning agency? It was a front. I'm going there now. I want to see the hole she crawled out of. The office above the check-cashing store was exactly as Sienna had left it. The door was locked. Dante kicked it open. The room was empty, smelling of bleach and old paper. The desk was bare. The files were gone. He had expected as much. He slammed his fist into the plaster wall, leaving a spider web of cracks. He was heartbroken. He was furious. She was his. Sienna was running. She had been walking for hours, her feet raw, her mind numb. The gunshot, the thud of the body, it played over and over in her head. She had brought that. She had made Dante Moretti a killer in his own home. She was a contamination. She had to get Leo. She had to disappear, this time for good. She found a payphone outside a boarded-up bodega, the receiver sticky, smelling of urine. Her hands were shaking as she dug a crumpled bill from her pocket and dialed the number she knew by heart. It rang once, twice. Grayson. "It's me," she whispered, her voice cracking. There was a sharp inhale on the other end. "Sienna? Christ, where are you? I've been trying to find you for weeks. The safe house is cold." Detective Mark Grayson. He had been Maya's partner, the only one who had survived the ambush because he'd been hospitalized with a burst appendix. He was the only person on Earth she trusted. "They found me. Mark," she choked, tears welling. "They know about Leo. You have to move him. You have to move him now." "I already did," he said, his voice grim. 2 weeks ago. He's safe. I have him with my sister upstate. But Sienna, it's worse than we thought. The Hollow Sons. They're not just being fed information. They're running a protection racket inside the bureau. I have the files. I have Maya's files." She backed them up. Sienna sagged against the phone booth. I was in a house. The Hollow Sons found me. They tried to take me." "Whose house?" Grayson demanded. "Sienna, who are you with?" "Dante Moretti." The silence on the line was absolute. "Sienna," Grayson said, his voice dropping, "you ran from the feds and you fell into bed with the black vow? Are you insane?" "You don't understand," she said, sobbing. He protected me, and now I've put him in the crosshairs. I have to go. I have to finish what Maya started. Give me the files. Mark, I'm done running." "No," he said. "It's over. You get out. I'll handle the files." "They killed her. They're still hunting her son. It's not over." "Meet me," he said, his voice resigned. "The old safe house, Pier 41, 1 hour. We talk, then you leave town." He hung up. Dante's men were everywhere. They were shaking down informants, pulling plates, hacking traffic cameras, but Dante knew where to look. He knew she would run to the one person she thought could help her, the man from the photographs, Agent Grayson. He put a tail on Grayson's unmarked car. It was almost too easy. He found her at the docks. The safe house was a condemned apartment above a fish market, the reek of salt and decay heavy in the air. He didn't wait for his men. He went in alone. He took the stairs 2 at a time. His gun in his hand, he heard voices. "You can't win this. Sienna, they will kill you. They already killed my sister. I am not letting Leo live his life in hiding." Dante kicked the door. It splintered from the frame, slamming against the inner wall. Sienna was there, standing in the middle of a derelict room. A duffel bag at her feet. A man, Grayson, was in front of her, his hand on his own weapon. Sienna froze, her face a mask of pure terror. "Dante, get away from her!" Dante snarled at Grayson. "Who the hell are you?" Grayson said, shielding Sienna, his gun half drawn. He's the one I told you about." Sienna breathed, her eyes locked on Dante. "Don't, please." She saw the fury in his face, the betrayal, the raw, possessive rage. He was not here to talk. He was here to claim. She tried to resist. It was a foolish, instinctual thing. As he advanced on her, she grabbed a rusted tire iron from a nearby table. "Stay back," she yelled, her voice trembling. I am done being your prisoner, your maid, your anything, just leave me alone. She swung the tire iron. He caught her wrist in a grip of steel, the metal clattering to the floor. He used her momentum to spin her around, slamming her back against the wall, his body pinning her. He was furious. He was shaking. He grabbed her face, his hands hard on her jaw, forcing her to look at him. His eyes were black, bottomless pits of rage and something else she could not name. Heartbreak. You should have told me, he whispered, his voice trembling. And just like that, her fight, her resistance, all of it broke. Told you what? She sobbed, her hands coming up to grip his wrists. Told you that my sister was murdered by a rival gang? That half the FBI in this city wants me dead? That I have a nephew in hiding who they're threatening to kill? That I'm poison? That I'm the reason you have a dead man in your study? The confession tumbled out of her, a torrent of pain and secrets. Dante's expression, the hard lines of his anger, softened. His grip on her face gentled, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones, wiping away the tears that now fell freely. Yes, he said, his voice raw. You should have told me all of it. I was trying to protect you, she cried. I don't need your protection, he said, his forehead pressing against hers. I don't care about the Hollow Sons. I don't care about the feds. They came into my house. They touched what was mine. Grayson, standing forgotten by the door, cleared his throat. Moretti, I don't know what your game is, but she's a federal witness. She's under my protection. Dante didn't even look at him. His eyes were locked on Sienna. You're not a maid, he said, his voice a low, rough murmur. You're not a maid. You're the only thing that's felt real to me in years. And you are not leaving me again. He turned to Grayson. Give me the files. Give me everything you have on the Hollow Sons and the corrupt agents. I'll handle it. Handle it? How? By killing them all? By ending it, Dante said. You can't. You're bound by rules. I'm not. You want to protect her? You want to protect the boy. Give me the ammunition. Grayson looked at Sienna. She was still pressed against the wall, held by Dante's gaze. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Grayson sighed, defeated. He tossed the duffel bag at Dante's feet. It's all in there, encrypted. The key is with her. Good, Dante said. He scooped up the bag, then, without a word, he lifted Sienna into his arms. Put me down, she protested, her voice weak. No, he said, and carried her out of the room. He walked past Grayson as if he were furniture. My man Luca will be in touch. Don't leave town. He carried her down the stairs and into the black sedan he had waiting. He put her in the passenger seat and got in beside her. He drove, one hand on the wheel, the other gripping her thigh, as if to make sure she could not vanish again. They drove back to the estate in silence. He did not take her to the staff quarters. He did not take her to the guest room. He took her to his own room. He shut the door, locking it. He tossed the duffel bag in the corner. She stood in the middle of the room, wrapped in his black shirt, looking small and lost. He walked to her, unfastening the holster and letting it fall to the floor. You're safe here, he said. I'm not safe anywhere, she whispered. Dante, you don't know what you've done. You've just declared war. Good. He reached out, his fingers tracing the bruise on her temple, which had faded to a sickly yellow. They hurt you. I've had worse, she said, her voice numb. His hand slid to the buttons of his shirt. Slowly, he undid them, one by one. She watched him, her heart thudding. This was not the desperate, frantic clash from before. This was something else. He pushed the shirt off her shoulders, letting it fall. She was in her thin maid's uniform pants and a bra. He looked at her, really looked at her. His fingers traced the pale, silvery line of a scar on her shoulder. How? Car accident, when I was 16, she whispered. His hand moved to her ribs, his thumb brushing another scar, this one a puckered, angry pink. This one? A disagreement. Back when I was still running. He lowered his head and he kissed the scar. Just a soft press of his lips. Sienna gasped, her eyes squeezing shut. He kissed her other scars, the one on her shoulder, the small one on her collarbone. He was not devouring her. He was mapping her. He was learning her. He was accepting her. You're covered in wounds, he murmured against her skin. She opened her eyes, her hands coming up. She pulled his Henley over his head, tossing it aside. She saw his. A jagged line across his abdomen, the unmistakable pucker of an old bullet hole near his heart. She reached out, her fingers trembling, and she touched the bullet wound. He flinched, but he did not pull away. "And you're not," she whispered. She leaned in, and she pressed her lips to that scar. He shuddered, his hands fisting in her hair, but it was not a gesture of control. It was one of desperate, profound release. He pulled her flesh against him, skin to skin, and his mouth found hers. This time, it was slow, it was emotional, it was an unburdening. There were no barriers. He kissed her like she was water and he was dying of thirst. She kissed him like he was an anchor and she had been lost at sea. It was a promise. A vow. It was two broken, wounded souls finally finding a place to heal. Later, wrapped in sheets, she lay tucked against his side, her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "You can't hide me forever," she murmured, her voice drowsy. "I'm not hiding you," he said, his hand stroking her hair. "I'm keeping you." He led her from the bedroom to an adjoining suite. It was hidden behind a false wall in his library, a place she had never known existed. It was not a guest room. It was a reinforced panic room, a high-tech bunker with its own air supply and a wall of security monitors. "You'll stay here," he said. "No one comes in here. No one but me. Dante, what about Luca? He knows I was a Fed." "Luca knows you're mine," Dante said, his voice absolute. "And he knows our enemies are the same. He's the only other person with the code." He closed the heavy, soundproof door, leaving her in the safest place in East Harbor, and went to plan his war. The hidden suite was a gilded cage, a high-tech fortress of silence and recycled air. For 2 days, Sienna had paced the luxurious carpets, a prisoner of Dante's protection. He was the only one who entered, bringing her food, reports, and the suffocating weight of his presence. The outside world, however, was not silent. "It's out," Dante said, closing the heavy, soundproof door behind him. He set a tray of food on the table, which she ignored. "Grayson, he's been detained by his own. They're calling him a rogue agent. They're trying to discredit him to get to you." Sienna's stomach tightened. "So they know he was helping me." "They know more than that," Dante said, his voice a low, cold rumble. "Word is on the street. The Hollow Sons know you didn't just disappear. They know you were in my house. They know you're mine. The word, mine, hung in the air. A brand. I told you," she whispered, her back to him. "I told you I was poison. You have to let me go, Dante, before they burn you down to get to me. It's too late for that." He came up behind her, standing so close she could feel the heat of his body, but he did not touch her. "They don't just want you anymore. They see you as a link to me, a weakness. They think they can use you to leverage my organization." She spun around, her eyes blazing. "So what? You kill me yourself? Hand me over?" "No," he said, his expression unreadable. "We use it. We use you." Sienna's breath hitched. "Bait. A lure," he corrected. "They want you. The corrupt feds want the files Maya had, and they want you silenced. The Hollow Sons want you dead as a loose end. Right now. They're two separate entities hunting the same target. We're going to bring them together." He began to pace, his energy too large for the room. "We set a meeting. We leak word that you're willing to trade the files for your life, and we leak to the Hollow Sons that I'm willing to sell you. We get them both in the same room, at the same time." "A trap," she breathed, her mind racing, seeing the tactical layout. "An ambush," he said. "We expose them both, the feds and the Sons, all tied up in one messy package. We record it, we end it, but I will not order it unless you agree. You are the bait. The risk is yours." Sienna stared at him, at this man who saw a war and, instead of running, sharpened his knives. This was his world, and he was inviting her into the center of it. Her immediate gut-wrenching reaction was not fear. It was guilt. "You'll die," she said, her voice hollow. They'll kill you. You don't understand them. The Hollow Sons are butchers, and the feds, they have tactics, resources. You'll be walking your entire organization into a massacre, all for me. You think this is for you? He snarled, stepping into her space, his anger a palpable force. This stopped being just about you when they broke into my home, when they put my organization at risk, when they tried to make me their executioner. I'm not worth your life, Dante, she yelled, shoving him in the chest. He didn't budge. He was a mountain. I'm not worth one of your men's lives. I won't do it. Just let me go. I'll run. I'll turn myself in. I'll make a deal for Leo. You think they make deals? He shot back, his hands gripping her shoulders. His grip was hard, anchoring. You think they'll take the files and just let you and the boy walk away? They will erase you. They will erase him. They will put a bullet in you and dump you in the harbor. The only way you will ever be free, the only way that boy will ever be safe, is if we cut the head off the snake, and we do it together. His words, brutal and logical, extinguished her fight. She sagged against him, her forehead dropping to his chest. He was right. Running was just a slower death. I'm scared, she whispered, the admission torn from her. His hands softened on her shoulders. He did not pull her closer, but he did not let her go. Good, he said, his voice a low vibration against her ear. It means you understand the stakes. He refused to let her push him away. He stayed in the suite with her, the two of them trapped in the quiet before the storm. That night, she watched him as he finally succumbed to exhaustion, asleep in a large armchair, the blueprints of a warehouse spread on the floor at his feet. He was not a king on a throne. He was a general on the eve of a battle he had chosen to fight for her. His face, in sleep, was younger. The lines of command and violence softened. A scar cut a white line across his jaw, a permanent mark of the life he lived. She knelt on the floor beside the chair, the silence of the room profound. She had spent her entire adult life in a state of hypervigilance, first as an analyst, then as a fugitive. She had never known true rest. She reached out, her fingers tracing the air an inch above his hand, afraid to touch him, afraid to wake the monster and lose the man. I've never felt safe, she whispered to the still, dark room. Not since Maya died. I've never felt truly safe, not until you. As if sensing her, his hand twitched, his fingers uncurling. She gently took his hand, her small, cold fingers lacing with his large, warm ones. He did not wake, but his grip tightened, holding her even in his sleep. She knelt there for hours, anchored. The next day, they worked. The plan was terrifying in its simplicity. Sienna, using a secure, encrypted messaging client she had built with her sister years ago, contacted her former handler, Agent Thorne. The man she knew was corrupt. Her message was simple. I have the original drive, all of Maya's files. I'm done running. I want to trade. My life and my nephew's guaranteed safety. One meeting, or I send it all to the press. Thorne's reply was almost immediate. You're a ghost, Sienna. Prove it's you. She sent him a single line of code, a key he and Maya had used. Where? He replied. While she baited the feds, Dante worked his own angles. He sent Luca to meet with a known intermediary for the Hollow Sons. Tell Rico, Dante had instructed, that I have the federal rat, the one they've been hunting. She's become more trouble than she's worth. I'm selling her. One night only, $2 million cash, and she's his. He can do what he wants with her. It was a gamble. A bet that both sides were arrogant enough to believe they were in control. It worked. Within hours, they had their meeting. Both parties had agreed. Midnight, the old shipping warehouse on Pier 9, a neutral, abandoned location, perfect for an ambush. The night of the meeting, the air in the suite was thick, static. Dante handed her a lightweight, concealable bulletproof vest. She pulled it on over a simple black shirt, the straps tight and uncomfortable. You'll be wearing this, he said, holding up a small, button-sized microphone and earpiece. Luca will hear everything, I will hear everything. What about a weapon? He looked at her, then nodded. He unlocked a biometric safe and pulled out a small, dark pistol. He checked the clip, then handed it to her. You know how to use it. It was not a question. She tucked it into the waistband at the small of her back. "When we get there, you stay by my side," he commanded, his voice all business. "You confirm the drive. You let them talk. The second I give the signal, you drop to the ground. You do not move. My men will handle the rest. You are not a soldier, Sienna." She looked up at him, her face pale but her eyes hard. "I'm not a maid either. I'm not hiding in a bunker, and I'm not cowering on the floor while your men die for me. This is not a discussion. You will do as I say." "No," she said, her voice quiet but unbending. "I've been running my whole life. Dante, from them, from you. I am done. I started this. I am seeing it through. If I die, at least it's not running." He stared at her, a long, hard silence stretching between them. He saw the woman from the shooting range photos. He saw the woman who had cried in his arms. He saw the steel in her spine. He gave a single, sharp nod. "Fine," he growled, "but you stay beside me. Your life is tied to mine. When I say drop, you drop. No arguments, understood." Understood. The warehouse stank of rust, old fish and river water. It was a cavernous tomb, filled with shadows. Dante's men, a dozen of his best, were ghosts in the rafters, hidden behind stacks of rotting crates, their sniper rifles trained on the center of the room. Dante and Sienna stood alone in a single, harsh pool of light cast by an industrial flood lamp. She held the small, encrypted hard drive in her hand, headlights cut through the darkness. 2 vehicles, then 2 more. They approached from opposite ends of the warehouse, their engines rumbling. They stopped. From one side, 3 men in dark suits emerged. Agent Thorne, his face smooth and confident, led them. From the other, 4 men in street clothes, their jackets bulging. Rico, the Hollow Sun's enforcer, a man with a roadmap of scars on his face, stepped out. They met in the middle, their eyes finding each other with open confusion. "Thorne," Rico sneered, "what the hell is this? You branching out into private sales?" "Moretti," Thorne snapped, ignoring Rico, his eyes on Dante. "I came here for a deal, not an auction. You're both here for the same thing," Dante said, his voice calm, echoing slightly in the vast space. "To clean up a mess." Sienna's heart was a drum against her ribs. She kept her eyes on Thorne. "Give me the drive." "Sienna," Thorne said, holding out his hand. "And we can end this. You and the boy. You'll be given new identities. A fresh start." Rico laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "You believe this, Snake? Give me the drive, girl, and I'll make it quick. A lot quicker than he will." "I'll only give it," Sienna said, her voice shaking just enough to be believable, "to the person who can guarantee my nephew's safety." Thorne smiled. It was a cold, thin expression that did not reach his eyes. "Your nephew?" "Leo." "Yes. We know all about Leo. Your friend Grayson's sister has been very cooperative. It's a nice house she has upstate. It would be a terrible shame if something were to happen to it." Sienna's blood turned to ice. It was a direct threat. They had him. "You see?" Rico said, his hand moving to his jacket. "Feds. Can't trust them. Give me the drive." "You're right," Thorne said, his own men fanning out. "You can't trust anyone." "I agree," Dante said, his voice suddenly loud and clear. Thorne and Rico both looked at him. Dante smiled. A cold, lethal baring of teeth. "At least you could agree on something before you die. Luca, now!" The world exploded. A concussion grenade, planted earlier, detonated near the Fed's car, sending a shockwave through the warehouse. It was not lethal, but it was deafening, blinding. "Ambush!" Thorne screamed. Drawing his weapon, the warehouse lit up. Gunfire erupted from the rafters, a precise, controlled rain of death. Thorne's agents and Rico's men, caught completely off guard, returned fire wildly, caught in a fatal crossfire. "Down!" Dante roared. He grabbed Sienna, shoving her behind a massive, rusted shipping container, shielding her body with his own as bullets sparked and whined off the metal. The air was full of smoke, cordite and shouting. Sienna, pinned beneath Dante, saw one of Thorne's agents, recovering from the blast. He was on one knee, raising his pistol, aiming not at the rafters, but at Dante's exposed back. There was no time to think. She twisted, pulling the pistol from her waistband. She fired twice. The man crumpled. Dante looked at her, his eyes wide with a flash of shock and something else. Pride. "Marco's hit!" Luca's voice screamed in their earpieces, followed by a heavy thud as one of Dante's men fell from the catwalk above. The chaos was total. "We have to move," Dante yelled, pulling her up. "That cover won't hold. To the exit, go!" He was pushing her, running low, firing at the remaining shadows. They were almost clear, almost to the steel door where two of his men were laying down cover fire. It happened in an instant, a stray shot from one of Rico's men, firing blindly into the smoke. Dante grunted. It was not a yell. It was a sharp, wet sound, a sudden expulsion of air. He stumbled, his hand flying to his side. Sienna stopped. "Dante?" He looked at her, his face pale, his teeth gritted. "Go!" he gasped, shoving her forward. "Run! Sienna!" She looked down. A dark crimson stain was spreading with terrifying speed across the side of his shirt. He had been shot. For a second, the world went silent, the gunfire, the shouting. It all faded. The only thing she could see was his face, pale in the flashing lights, and the blood. A scream tore from her throat. It was not a sound of fear. It was a sound of pure, animalistic rage. She was not running. She grabbed him, hooking her shoulder under his arm, taking his full weight. "No!" she screamed. "You're not dying here!" She dragged him, half carrying him, back behind the relative safety of a stack of steel barrels. The warehouse was still a war zone. Bullets ripped through the air. She eased him to the ground, his back against the metal. "You're okay," she whispered, her voice frantic. Sobbing, she pressed both her hands to the wound, the hot, sticky blood coating her instantly. "You're okay. You're okay. Stay with me?" He looked at her, his eyes glazed with pain, a pained, bloody smile twisting his lips. "Told you to stay down, damn it," he coughed, and his eyes rolled back. Dante's eyes rolled back, his body going limp. Sienna screamed his name, her hands slick with his blood, pressing down on the wound with all her weight. "No, no, no, stay with me," she pleaded, her voice a raw, broken thing. The warehouse was still chaos, but the gunfire was becoming more sporadic. She could hear Luca's voice, clear and cold over the comms, directing the cleanup. "Rico's down, Thorne is down, all targets neutralized. Secure the package." Sienna didn't care. She was in her own bubble of terror. "Dante!" She shook him, her bloody hands marking his face. Wake up, damn it!" A figure in black tactical gear slid to a halt beside her. Luca. He knelt, his eyes taking in the scene in a fraction of a second. Dante, unconscious, Sienna, hysterical, covered in blood. "He's hit," she sobbed. "He's hit. He's bleeding. I can't stop it." Luca didn't panic. He ripped a field dressing from his vest, his movements fast and practiced. He shoved her hands aside and pressed the dressing to the wound, hard. "Pressure. Hold that. Exactly like that. Do not let up." He spoke into his mic. "Boss is hit. I need extraction. West door, now." Distant sirens wailed, growing closer, the local police, responding to the gunfire. "We have to go," Luca said, his voice grim. He checked Dante's pulse. "He's alive. Fading. We move." "I can't carry him." "You won't." Two more of Dante's men appeared, their faces grim. Together, they formed a makeshift chair with their arms and lifted their boss. "Sienna, with me," Luca commanded, grabbing her arm. He pulled her up. His gaze was intense. "You did good. You saved his life back there. Now, let's save it again." He half-dragged her through the smoking, body-strewn warehouse, following the team carrying Dante. They burst through the west door just as a black armored van screeched to a halt. They piled in. The doors slammed shut, the vehicle tearing away from the pier just as the first police cruisers flooded the scene. The ride was a blur. Sienna never let go of Dante's hand. She kept her other hand pressed on the dressing, her arm aching, her entire world narrowed to the man bleeding out beside her. They did not go to a hospital. They went to the estate. A private sterile medical wing was hidden in the sub-basement, staffed by a private surgeon on Dante's payroll. The doctor, a grim-faced man with tired eyes, was waiting. "Clear the room," the surgeon ordered, as Dante was transferred to the operating table. "No," Sienna said, her voice hollow. She was still holding his hand. "Ma'am, I have to work." "No," she repeated, her grip tightening. Luca put a hand on her shoulder. "Sienna, let him work. He's the only one who can save him. You have to let go." She looked at her hand, covered in his blood, clasped in his, which was pale and cold. She was shaking. She didn't know how to let go. "He'll be here when you get back," Luca said, his voice softening. "I promise. Go. Clean up. I'll come and get you." She finally, reluctantly released his hand. Her own felt impossibly empty. Sienna showered in the hidden suite, the water running red down the drain. She scrubbed her skin until it was raw, but she could still smell the iron and cordite. She dressed in clean, black clothes Dante kept for her, soft sweats and a t-shirt. She felt like a ghost in his home. She sat on the floor, her back against the wall, and waited. 1 hour, 2. Finally, Luca appeared at the door. His face was unreadable. "He's alive," Luca said, and the world rushed back into focus. Sienna's knees nearly buckled with relief. "He's alive," Luca repeated, steadying her. "The bullet passed clean through. Missed his vitals by an inch. He lost a lot of blood, but he's strong. He's unconscious. The doctor says the next few days are critical, but he's alive." "I want to see him," she whispered. Dante was in a private recovery room, a sterile white space filled with the quiet, rhythmic beeping of machines. He looked small in the bed, pale beneath his olive skin, an IV line in his arm, bandages stark white against his side. Sienna pulled a chair to his bedside, and she sat. For 3 days, she did not leave. Luca brought her food she barely touched and coffee she drank until she vibrated. She just sat, and she held Dante's hand. She watched the steady rise and fall of his chest, and she talked. She whispered stories into the silent, antiseptic air. She told him about Maya, about the way her sister used to laugh, a loud, obnoxious snort that embarrassed her in public. She told him about Leo, about the day he was born, how he'd had a full head of black, spiky hair. She told him about her childhood, about her first failed field test at the academy, about the scar on her shoulder from the car accident she'd lied about. It hadn't been an accident. It had been a training exercise gone wrong. She unburdened herself, pouring her entire past, her entire soul, into the man who lay silent. "I was so scared. Dante," she whispered on the 3rd night, her voice raw, her head resting on their joined hands. "I've been running for so long. I didn't know how to stop. And then you wouldn't let me run. You saw me. You really saw me. And I was so angry because you made me feel safe, and I knew it wouldn't last." While she kept her vigil, the world outside the estate was imploding. The wire recording from Sienna's earpiece had been perfect. Luca had released it, not to the press, but to specific trusted channels within the federal government, the ones above the corruption. Agent Thorne's threat against Leo, his open collusion with Rico and the Hollow Sons, was undeniable. It was a bomb. The fallout was immediate. Arrests began, sweeping through the East Harbor Federal Building. Corrupt agents, high-level supervisors, all were taken into custody. The Hollow Sons, their leadership decapitated in the warehouse, crumbled. The rest were rounded up in a city-wide sweep, their empire collapsing in a single night. The recordings also cleared Sienna completely. She was not a fugitive. She was a hero, a key witness. On the 4th day, Luca entered the room. "Grayson is here," he said quietly. Sienna looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. Detective Grayson stood in the doorway, his face etched with relief. "It's over, Sienna," he said, his voice thick. "We got them, Thorne, the whole network. They're all going down. Maya. We got justice for Maya." Sienna burst into tears, a clean, quiet sob of pure, unadulterated relief. "What about Leo?" she whispered. "He's safe," Grayson assured her. "He's with my sister. The protective custody order is in place. He'll be given a new identity, a new life, far from here. And you're clear. You're free. Sienna, you can go to him. You can start over." Sienna looked at Grayson, at the offer of a new life, a clean slate, a chance to be with her nephew. She looked at the door, the pathway to her freedom. Then she looked at the man in the bed. His hand was still in hers. "Thank you. Mark," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Tell Leo. Tell him I love him. Tell him his mother was a hero. But I'm not going." Grayson frowned. "Sienna, what are you talking about? You're free." "I know," she said, her gaze returning to Dante. "I am, but I'm not leaving him." Grayson looked at the mafia boss, at the woman who refused to leave his side, and he finally understood. He nodded. A sad, respectful gesture. "I'll tell him." He left her to her vigil. That night, she was drifting in a light, exhausted sleep, her head on the edge of his mattress, her hand still in his. His fingers twitched. Sienna's head snapped up. She was instantly awake. His eyes were fluttering. "Dante," she breathed, her heart seizing. His eyelids opened, slow and heavy. He blinked, his gaze unfocused, trying to make sense of the white room, the beeping. He tried to speak, his throat dry. "Sienna." It was a rasp, a bare whisper, but it was her name. Tears streamed down her face, all the terror and exhaustion of the past 4 days releasing at once. She gripped his hand with both of hers, pressing it to her cheek. "I'm here," she cried, her voice thick. "I'm here. I thought I lost you." He turned his head, his gaze finding her. It took him a moment, but his eyes focused. He saw her tear-streaked face, her devotion. A faint, painful smile touched his lips. "You're not just a maid, huh?" he whispered. A choked, wet laugh burst from her. It was a sound of pure joy. She leaned her forehead against his, their tears mingling. "No, I'm not." Weeks passed. Dante healed with the same stubborn, relentless will he applied to everything. He had been moved from the medical wing back to his own suite, and Sienna had moved in with him. She had not left his side. The estate was quieter. With the hollow suns gone, a new, undisputed peace had settled over East Harbor, a peace ruled by the Black Vow. One evening, Sienna was standing in the garden, the same garden where she used to sit by the stagnant fountain, a ghost in a maid's uniform. The fountain was clean now, the water flowing, the late autumn air crisp. She was no longer in a uniform. She wore a simple, elegant dark dress, her hair long and loose down her back. She looked up as she heard footsteps on the gravel. Dante. He was moving stiffly, his side still tender, but he was dressed. He walked to her, his eyes never leaving her face. He looked at her, truly seeing her, not as a puzzle, not as a maid, not as a fugitive, but as the woman who had saved his life. He reached out, his hand tracing her jawline, his thumb brushing her lower lip, just as he had done in his study what felt like a lifetime ago. This time, she did not flinch. She leaned into his touch. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close, burying his face in her hair. "Whatever you were," he murmured, his voice a low, possessive rumble against her skin. "A spy, a maid, a soldier. I don't care. Whatever you are, you're mine now." Sienna pulled her head back, her hands coming up to cup his face, her gaze meeting his, strong and equal. "As long as you're mine, too," she replied. He kissed her. It was not the desperate, clinging kiss of the storm, nor the emotional release of their reunion. It was slow and deep and certain. It was a promise. A new beginning. He kept his arm around her waist, turning her to face the horizon. The sky was just beginning to lighten, the first, pale pink fingers of dawn stretching over the dark, gritty skyline of East Harbor. They stood together in the cold morning air, two broken, scarred souls who had walked through fire and found peace in the last place they ever expected. They watched the sunrise. Thank you so much for listening to our story. We would be absolutely thrilled if you drop a comment and let us know where in the world you are listening from. Be sure to subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories so you never miss a new chapter. And please, share your thoughts on Dante and Sienna's journey in English. We love hearing from you.